In 1938, a couple named the Huns were walking along a riverbank near the small town of London, Texas. Yes, there really is a London in Texas. They noticed a strange rock with a piece of wood sticking out of it, just a stick. It seemed trapped in sandstone. They took it home as a keepsake and set it on the mantel. It sat there for nearly 10 years. No one gave it a second thought, until their son decided to crack the rock open in 1947. What he found stopped him cold. The wooden stick was actually the handle of a hammer. It was firmly locked inside the stone and connected to a cleanly shaped iron head. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary hammer. The problem was the rock around it. Early estimates put the age of that sandstone somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 years. That should have been impossible. People weren't forging iron tools 300,000 years ago. Neanderthals were still figuring out how to chip stone, yet here was a metal hammer sealed inside ancient rock. As if someone had left it behind long before our species even existed, the object became known as the London Hammer. It has inspired books, articles, and countless online videos. Some people treat it as proof of a lost advanced civilization. Others see alien visitors. Still, others call it a simple mistake in dating. Before we pick a side, it's worth looking at the bigger picture. The London Hammer is only one of many so-called impossible artifacts found over the last 2 centuries. Each one raises the same awkward question: what if we're missing something important about our own past? These objects are often called out-of-place artifacts, or OP. The term was coined in the 1960s by the naturalist Ivan Sanderson. It covers any object that turns up in a geological or archaeological setting that doesn't match the accepted timeline: an iron nail in a lump of coal, a gold chain in a coal seam, a concrete wall buried 100 meters down. Each one is like a thorn in the side of mainstream science. Not fatal, but hard to ignore. Let's look at the London Hammer more carefully. The hammer itself is real. You can see it today at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. A small private museum run by the creationist Carl Baugh. He presents it as evidence that the Earth is only a few thousand years old. The hammer is about 15 centimeters long, with a metal head roughly 6 centimeters across. The wooden handle is partly petrified, which suggests it spent a long time in mineral-rich ground. Chemical tests show the metal is about 96% iron, 2.5% chlorine, and less than 1% sulfur. That chlorine level is unusual for modern alloys, and it has fueled a lot of speculation. Supporters of the ancient civilization idea point to 3 main claims. First, the rock is hundreds of thousands of years old, so the hammer must be too. Second, the metal mix doesn't match anything we make today, so it must come from unknown technology. Third, the wood has partly turned to coal, which they say proves extreme age. Put together, the argument is that someone made an iron hammer long before any human should have been able to work metal. It sounds persuasive at first, but the skeptical view is just as strong. Geologists know that the age of a rock and the age of an object trapped inside it are not the same thing. Mineral-rich water can seep through soil and slowly build a hard shell of sandstone or limestone around almost anything. This process is called concretion. An object only 100 or 200 years old can end up wrapped in a crust that looks ancient. The hammer could have fallen into a crack, been covered by sediment, and grown its stone coat in a relatively short time. There are other problems. The hammer was not found during a controlled dig. A couple simply picked it up on a riverbank. There were no witnesses, no photographs of it in place, and no record of the exact layer it came from. In archaeology, context is everything. Without it, most of the scientific value is lost. We don't know the depth, the surrounding material, or anything else that would help date it properly. The unusual chlorine content can also be explained without mystery. Chlorine from saltwater or minerals in the soil can alter metal over a few centuries of corrosion. A geochemist would not be surprised if a hammer left in mineralized Texas ground ended up with that composition. Stylistically, the hammer looks exactly like tools used by American miners and farmers in the mid-1800s. The shape, size, and proportions match the period. Texas was being actively mined then, and tools were often lost in cracks, riverbanks, and old workings. A hammer dropped around 1850 could easily have been buried and coated over the next century and a half. Still, the skeptical explanation has never been fully tested. No thorough radiocarbon dating has been done on the wooden handle. No detailed study has proven whether the rock formed around the hammer or whether the hammer was original to the rock. The museum owner does not allow independent researchers free access. That secrecy feeds suspicion on both sides. Skeptics say he is protecting a fragile claim. Alternative history fans say mainstream science is afraid of the truth. So the London hammer sits in limbo, neither confirmed nor ruled out. Perfect fuel for arguments that never end. It is only one example. In 1885, a worker in an Austrian coal mine near Schondorf split a piece of tertiary brown coal, rock dated between 2 and 65 million years old, and found a small metal object inside. It was almost cubic, weighed about 700 grams, and had a neat groove around the middle. Analysis showed iron with some nickel and carbon. The discovery caused a stir. A metal cube inside million-year-old coal seemed even stranger than the Texas hammer. Some scientists suggested it was a meteorite. Others pointed to the clean groove and argued it had to be man-made. The object was displayed in a museum in Linz, later vanished from view, and was eventually rediscovered in storage. Closer study indicated it was most likely a Castran counterweight from 19th-century mining gear that had fallen into the coal seam during operations. The original sensational story had already spread and still circulates online. Cases like this highlight a common pattern. Many impossible artifacts turn out to be modern objects that entered older layers through mining, quarrying, or construction. Archaeologists call this intrusion. When the mixing is not recorded, the result can look like an anomaly. Not every puzzle is so easily dismissed. The Antikythera Mechanism is a different kind of surprise. In 1901, sponge divers found a Roman shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera, dated to around 70 BC among the Amphorian statues. They brought up a corroded lump of bronze. When it was cleaned, researchers discovered more than 30 precisely meshed bronze gears inside. It was a complex geared device made with a precision once thought impossible for the ancient world. More than a century of study, including X-ray imaging and computer modeling, showed it was an analog computer. It could track the positions of the sun, moon, and the 5 known planets, predict eclipses, follow the Olympic cycle, and even account for the moon's irregular orbit. Nothing of similar sophistication appeared in Europe until the 15th century. The Antikythera Mechanism does not challenge the timeline the way the London hammer does. Its age and origin are clear. In Greece, 2nd century BC or so. What it challenges is our assumption about the level of technology available at the time. It shows that knowledge can be gained, used, and then lost. Progress is not a straight line from stone tools to smartphones. Civilizations rise, peak, and collapse, taking skills with them. Roman concrete techniques were forgotten for centuries after the empire fell. Egyptian stoneworking methods still puzzle us. Damascus steel, Greek fire, and the Antikythera device all belong to the same category. Technologies that existed, were used, and later disappeared. That is a big difference from claiming a full industrial civilization 300,000 years ago. The Antikythera Mechanism stretches our picture of the classical world, but it does not rewrite the deep timeline. For that, much stronger evidence would be needed. Other finds keep the questions alive. Near Ottostol in South Africa, miners have pulled metallic-looking spheres from pyrophyllite beds roughly 2.8 billion years old. Some of the spheres, between 2.5 and 10 centimeters across, have smooth surfaces and fine parallel grooves around the middle, almost as if they were turned on a lathe. Photos circulated widely and theories ranged from fossilized alien eggs to proof of a civilization billions of years ahead of us. Geologists later showed they are natural concretions formed by minerals growing around a central point. The grooves are simply layers of different composition. Nature routinely produces highly regular shaped snowflakes, crystals, basalt columns without any intelligence involved. Then there are the Baghdad batteries, clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods. Dated to the Parthian period about 2,000 years ago, when filled with an acidic liquid such as vinegar or grape juice, they produce a small electric current. One theory is that they were used for electroplating jewelry. Another is that they were simply containers for sacred scrolls, and the electrical effect is accidental. The debate continues, and the objects sit somewhere between the unlikely and the unexplained. Supporters of ancient advanced cultures often argue that the sheer number of these anomalies is too high to dismiss every single one as error or contamination. Find one coin on the seafloor and it is chance. Find 100 and you start looking for a ship. Critics reply that the sample is still too thin. Most of these finds come from the 19th and early 20th centuries, when recording standards were poor. Few were photographed in place or studied with modern methods. We are often dealing with second or third-hand stories rather than solid data. There is also a strong selection effect. Mysterious stories get books and documentaries, solved ones do not. A film titled "It Was Just a 19th Century Hammer" would not draw millions of viewers. A film about a 300,000-year-old tool would. The strongest skeptical point is broader. A genuine technological civilization lasting any length of time would leave far more than one hammer. It would leave foundations, mining waste, chemical signatures in the soil, and shifts in atmospheric composition that show up in ice cores. Our own short industrial age has already left microplastics in the deep ocean and radioactive isotopes in Antarctic ice. A civilization hundreds of thousands of years older should have left an even clearer geological mark. We do not see one. In 2018, the astrophysicist Gavin Schmidt and the astrobiologist Adam Frank published a paper called the Silurian Hypothesis, named after a fictional race from Doctor Who. They asked a different question. If an industrial civilization had existed millions of years before humans, what traces would remain? Their answer was surprising. After 10 million years, almost nothing solid would survive. Concrete would turn to dust, plastic would break down, metals would oxidize and dissolve. The only lasting signs might be chemical anomalies in sedimentary rock spikes and carbon from burned fuel. Traces of synthetic compounds, shifts in isotope ratios, those are the signals we should look for if we want to test the idea of a pre-human civilization. The paper is not a claim that such a civilization existed. It is a reminder that our search methods may be incomplete. Geology has focused on fossils and minerals more than on industrial fingerprints in deep time. The traces might be there, and we simply have not learned how to read them yet. So, where does that leave the London hammer and objects like it? They are almost certainly not proof of a lost high-tech civilization. They are genuine puzzles. They are also useful prompts. Their real value is that they force us to notice the limits of what we know. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Our civilization is a few thousand years old and instant on that scale. We have examined only a tiny fraction of the crust, the seafloor, and the ice record. Claiming we already know the full story of the planet's past is a kind of arrogance science cannot afford. The simplest explanation for the Texas hammer is still the best. A 19th century miner or farmer lost it. It fell into a crack, collected a mineral crust, and was found a century later by people walking along a river. Occam's razor favors that version, yet the explanation has never been rigorously tested. As long as the hammer remains closed to independent study, it will keep serving as a blank screen. Creationists see a young Earth. Alternative history enthusiasts see a forgotten civilization. Skeptics see an ordinary tool in an unusual setting. Scientists see a reminder that even ordinary objects can become complicated. In the end, the story of these artifacts is really a story about our hunger for wonders, our discomfort with the unknown, and our quiet hope that we are not the first intelligent beings on this planet. The hammer sealed in stone is not an answer. It is a question. That may be why it continues to fascinate people. We do not know who made it, and we may never know. There is one final irony. If another civilization digs up our remains millions of years from now, they will find plastic bottles, concrete foundations, nuclear waste, and satellites still in orbit. They will have no doubt we were here. But if an earlier civilization existed without plastic, nuclear power, or concrete, what would be left of it? Perhaps only a single disputed hammer on a Texas riverbank, one small, unconvincing, endlessly debated trace. That possibility, more than any claim of proof, is what keeps these objects interesting. They remind us that 4.5 billion years is an almost unimaginable stretch of time, and that our knowledge of it is still only a thin film on the surface of a very deep past.